Okay, welcome to Don't Be a Copycat, Personalized Marketing for Your Game. My name is Derek Liu, and I'll be doing this talk with my friend Dana Trabella. But let me first tell me if this sounds familiar. You need to market your game, but you're really, really overwhelmed because there are just so many tools and apps and talks and videos and articles saying, do this and do this. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, I guess I'll just do all the things, or maybe I'll do what that game did because it looked like they had success. But really, you don't really know how or why you should be doing any of these things. So we're here to help you market your game with goals and intentions so then that you can find what works best for you, because there's so many ways that you can market your game. But first, a little bit about Dana.
Hey, I'm Dana Trabella. I'm the founder of Spoken Wheel Strategy, where I do PR, marketing, and brand strategy for games. I've been running Spoken Wheel Strategy for the last 6.5 years, but have been doing marketing for PR and games since 2012. I've worked on tons of different games, all different sizes, all different platforms, and these are just a small sample of some of the games that I've worked on that you've heard of.
All right, and as I said, my name is Derek Liu. I'm a video game trailer editor. I've been doing it for full time, about 5 years, but I've been editing video for about 15 years. And here's a small sample of some games that I've worked on. I've worked on games with really small teams and games with much bigger teams. And I know, and yeah. All right, so as I was saying, there are so many ways to market your games. There's your Steam store page, there's Imager, newsletters, mailing lists, Discord, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter. And the first step to really start marketing your game is to just know what are the tools that you have at your disposal potentially. And the second is to understand what your marketing goals are. And the third is to choose which tactics to use in order to fulfill those goals, because especially if you're indie, you have to be really efficient with your time and your money. You can't really afford to just try everything, do everything at the same time, and just sort of stretch yourself thin and potentially just not do any of it very well. So next up, Dana is going to talk about the goals you should be aiming for when it comes to marketing your game.
Great. So as Derek mentioned, we're going to talk about goals. So ultimately, everyone should have their own personalized goals for their game, depending on the team, the size of the game, and lots of other external factors. But one thing that I always hear over and over when I ask people about their goals is that they're always just hyper-focused on sales. And obviously sales as a part of it is really important, but there's lots of other goals that you can have beyond just how many copies you sell. So things like, do you want to find a publisher or build a community or just learn how marketing works? Here, though, we're going to walk through some goals that everyone should probably have for their marketing, regardless of your own personalized goals. So first, you want to make your game stand out. So you want to make it look and sound different from everything else out there. And also remember to differentiate within your own genre. So if your game marketing makes your game look or sound the same as everything else, you're probably wasting your time and your money and your efforts. So it's really important to showcase your game's strengths in a way that's digestible and accessible, and also will resonate with your desired target audience. So next, you want to provide a means to easily find and share and follow your game. So we all know that attention span is pretty short, and you risk losing players or potential community members if they don't have an easy way to follow you or get some kind of regular reminder that your game exists. So it's also important to remember that people want to tell others about the things that they've seen or they played or that they're really excited about. And the easier that it is to share something, the more likely and more often that it'll get shared. And then lastly, your game should always end with a call to action, or your marketing should always end with a call to action, which ultimately removes friction for the player to do what you want. So you want to make it as easy as possible. So for example, on the end slate of a trailer, you should probably always have things like wish list now, or your Twitter handle, or website, or things like that. So next, you want to provide the media, so that's press, YouTubers, and streamers, information that's easy to digest and find so that they can write stories and produce content. So media want to create stories and streams, etc., on things that their audience would be really interested in. But in order to do that, the information needs to be easy to find and tell a clear and consistent message. So just like anyone else, media and streamers love it when you make their job easy for them and easily summarize the information and remove friction to make everything easy to find and access, like screenshots, trailers, your game description, etc. So you also want to inform the customer so that they can make a decision and be motivated to purchase. It's really important to remember that marketing is not about tricking people. It's about informing them so they can decide if it's of interest to them and they can make a decision for themselves. So at a basic level, you want people to know things like what consoles or platforms, what genre, how much does it cost, what's the playthrough time, etc. And then we're going to be talking a lot about this today, but you want to understand the intention of each marketing component to decide what makes sense for your game. So kind of like Derek talked about early on, we both see people just doing things a lot of the time because they don't know what to do, or they think they should do certain things, or saw that it worked for somebody else, and are sort of just aimlessly roaming around the marketing bubble. But it's really important to know the why behind every marketing strategy, tactic, and choice that you make, and that you're making choices based on all of the goals that we just talked about, and also your personalized goals and the type of game that you're making, the audience it's for, and the resources that you have. So now that we've said repeatedly, don't just do something because someone said that you should do this. Here, we're going to walk through all of the things that you should probably do in order to market your game. So you've probably heard of all of these marketing components to some degree, but we're going to walk through what the intention or purpose should be behind each of these, as well as the workload, the upkeep, and the importance, which you'll see we've denoted on each of the slides. So you can keep those in mind while making your own marketing plans. So first, your message, which is a cohesive, consistent, and compelling way to talk about your game. In its most basic form, it's your elevator pitch, but it really should be based off of what makes your game special or different from everything else out there and inform all of your marketing. Little self-plug, Derek and I actually did a talk at GPC 2019 all about creating a message for your game and how to enact that in your marketing and your trailers, if you feel like checking that out. So the intention behind your message should be, ultimately, you're going to use words to communicate what your game is, what makes it different, and hopefully makes people interested in learning more about your game and want to follow it and share it, and ultimately, hopefully, they buy it. What I also always say to people is, if you don't have a message, what are you saying? And it's really easy to tell when someone doesn't, because that's when you often see things like the screenshots not actually reflecting what the game is, or the trailer feeling really disjointed, or things like that. So you can see here, like I mentioned earlier, we've denoted how much work and importance and upkeep everything requires. So your message is a fair amount of work. It's really important. And once you have it, it's pretty much done. You should definitely make sure that you're testing it and getting feedback on it, but not something that you need to consistently workshop throughout your marketing. So here's a couple of quick examples of some clear and compelling messages. So things like time moves when you move, or it's a lovely morning in the village and you're a horrible goose. So a couple quick tips. You want to make it clear, concise, and accessible. You want to convey what the game is and the player experience really quickly. You want to leave people wanting more. So you want to kind of tease it and not say everything all at once. And then also you want to steer clear from common traps of relying only on genre, or comparing your game with others, or doing things like my game is a mix of, if X and Y had a baby. So marketing timeline is exactly what it sounds like. A clear framework of your game's marketing timeline from your announcement to launch. And it's also a thing that almost everybody skips. So your intention, if you do this correctly, is that it provides you a framework and an understanding of what assets you'll need and when throughout your entire public-facing marketing process so that you can be more prepared and hopefully also be less stressed. It also is important to note this is internal. Nobody ever needs to see this or know that it exists. And then a few quick tips here. Most importantly is to start with your realistic launch time frame and work backwards. So for example, you want to, if you're going to launch in 6 months, you want to announce your game let me start that over. Okay. So most importantly, you want to start with your realistic launch timeframe and work backwards to determine your marketing beats. So what that means is it's really important to be honest with yourself about your time and your resources and your launch timeline. So if you plan an entire marketing campaign with a 6-month launch timeframe, but it's actually going to be a year, then you're only hurting yourself. So it's really important to make sure that you're timing that as accurately as you can. So you want to work backwards from your launch date to your first time that you announce your game. And that ultimately is the timeline that you have to fill with fun marketing things. And then it's also really important to think about the spacing between your marketing beats. Again, keeping in mind how long your overall timeline is, and think it through so that you're not putting too much into a condensed time frame or taking too much space between them. So Press Kit, this is just an easy to download package of assets to help the media write about your game. Super straightforward. It makes it easier for press to cover your game. And you want to make sure that you're providing not an overwhelming amount of information, because that can feel daunting to people and prohibit them from covering. So you want to do things like 5 to 7 screenshots, put your trailer, your pricing information about the game, and it should all be in one very easy to download and one concise place. So your press list, this is a list of journalists, YouTubers, streamers, etc., who are most likely to be interested in your game. The intention is you want to keep track of this targeted media who are more likely to cover your game because they're specifically interested in the type of game that you're making. So a couple of quick tips here is that you want to research folks who have covered or streamed games who are similar to yours. So that might be similar games in your genre or competitors. And you want to look at those similar games or competitors within the last year or two. Going too far back is often outdated information. And you want to make sure your press list contains everybody's contact information so you can easily outreach to them. And you can often find the contact information through the media outlet themselves. And many of them have consistent formats that they use. So it's actually really easy to find all of them. You also want to make sure you update it consistently and that you keep thorough notes. So update it consistently because journalists in particular move around a lot. And you want to keep notes of why someone might be interested in your game, if someone responded previously or previously covered or made a comment to you about the art or something in your game. You want to make sure that you have that so that you can be really personalized in your approach. Which brings me to your press emails. So the intention here is to get press or streaming coverage in accordance with your marketing beat. Marketing beat being is it an announcement of your game? Is it your launch trailer, etc.? So again, you want to make sure that you've researched the people that you're conducting outreach to so that it can be really personalized in your approach. You do not want to just send a mass email. Nobody likes that. It doesn't feel good. And you want to include easy links to your trailer, your press kit, and your store page because, again, we're removing friction to make things as easy as possible. So now Derek is going to carry on with the rest of the essentials.
All right, so next up is Twitter. Twitter is unique in that it's just a really low commitment way for people to follow you, which counterpoint to that is that when you have links on Twitter, they generally don't really convert very well, but it's just a good way to just have it's a good way to communicate with other people about your game, whether that is press or curators, investors, scouts. A lot of professionals and developers are on Twitter. I mean, of course, potential players, but it's kind of more of a place for connecting with people within the industry who will then sort of broadcast your game out even further. And also you can use it to show development, share screenshots, and GIFs. A really good GIF on Twitter can get a lot of retweets potentially. So it is one place that you probably want to be. And so the workload and the upkeep, they're kind of on the high end because Twitter is one of those things where if you don't use it a lot, it looks like the account is dead. And you have to just be fairly active on there so then that people know that it's actually worth following. But as far as like discovery and stuff, it's not the most important thing, but you can use it to create a lot of professional relationships. All right, next up is your announce trailer. Of course, you have to let people know your game exists. Hopefully you do it with a really good announce trailer to announce the game, spark interest, hopefully get a lot of wish lists and media coverage, and also start building a following. Trailers are a lot of work and they're very, very important, but once it's done, it's done. So you don't really have to worry about any sort of upkeep. And then next is your launch trailer. So I only have in the essentials 2 trailers because at the bare minimum, you have to announce the game exists and then announce when it came out. Everything else I think is pretty much extra, but it depends on the game. But yeah, the launch trailer is there to announce that the game is out, where you can buy it, and motivate people to buy it, and maybe tie up some lingering questions about gameplay or the story, and get people really hyped, hopefully. Again, lots of work, not a lot of upkeep, but very important. Next up are screenshots, which, I mean, screenshots just another way to show what the game looks like, but they're sort of more immediate than trailers because images you can just have on social media posts or maybe from your press kit, provide images that can be used in articles, maybe use them to show what the game's UI looks like or sort of the genre space, and just to make the other things about your game look very pretty. Not as much work as a trailer, and there is a little bit of upkeep because you want to make sure your screenshots are up to date. You don't want to release your game and have all the articles show really old screenshots, which has definitely happened before, and they're very important as well. Especially for your store page, because your store page is there to provide sort of information about the genre space and the sort of the content and the features of the game, and of course make it look very appealing, hopefully with a really good trailer and good screenshots. And it's there to just motivate people to buy, maybe wishlist it if they're not quite committed yet or it's just not out yet. And your store page, not a ton of work. I mean, it takes a fair amount of work to make it look good. And you need to do a little bit of upkeep every now and then so that it looks kind of active, but it is very, very important for it to have a really good store page with all this stuff in one place. And then related are the store metadata tags. This is especially for Steam, because if you don't have really good tags for your game on Steam, not only do people not quite know what genre it is, but Steam itself actually will have difficulty sorting your game into the store. And what you want is to have really good tags according to your genre and like the vibe and tone of your game, so then that other similar games might recommend yours like on the bottom of that page. And because I mean, a lot of your customers, especially in a bigger genre, will probably be more people who have played games very similar to yours. So you want to make sure Steam knows how to categorize your game. And, on the grand scheme of things, not a lot of work. And I think pretty much you can set it and forget it once you've set those up, but also very important. Okay, so next are some nice to haves. Now, a lot of these I would still say are pretty important, but they're not like the super core part of the marketing. So you will not die if you don't have them, but some of these can still be very effective if you have the time and resources to do them well. First up is a mailing list. Or newsletter, whatever you want to call it. This is just a way to just communicate very consistently with the people who show the most interest in your game. And they have the most interest because they gave you their email address as to just following you on Twitter, because people who give you their email address means that they really they're really interested and want to get all the nice juicy details. And really the other intention is just cultivate a long-term engaged audience, either just for your game or your studio, and then future games potentially if you release more than one. And the workload can vary depending on how much you want to update or send out newsletter articles. So it can be more or less based off if you send out a newsletter like once a month or once a week. So it can be a decent amount of upkeep, because people, you want them to have a reason to actually be subscribed. You don't want just to use it as like a, hey, the game's out, buy it. You need to give something to them. So yeah, in the long run, mailing lists can be very important. And one good example of mailing list I've seen that's I think done very well is this one for Kit Fox Games game Boyfriend Dungeon. What they did was each article that they send out is sent as if it's a letter from one of the love interests from the game. So in this case, it was a cat. And sort of down below this section, they had parts like updates about the game and some cases about the studio themselves. So there are ways you can personalize it and make it more fun. Animated GIFs. Animated GIFs can be really, really effective at marketing your game, especially if your game is the sort that can be summed up in a GIF, which that's not all games, but if it can, then you really should be making animated GIFs to make your social media posts a lot prettier and potentially getting a lot of attention, like I said, if it goes like viral because this one GIF from your game really took off. And it, it could just be something that like a glitch that happened in your game that was really funny, but animated GIFs can be really good. And they're kind of more work to make, just because there's a whole process to like take video and then capture it and turn it into a GIF. And just like screenshots, you want to sort of keep them up to date. But they can be very important also for your store page. Next up, gameplay and story trailers. Yeah, these are just to sort of flesh out either the gameplay or the narrative of the game, depending on what sort of game that you're making. Because some games, it's all about the gameplay. Some, it's mostly about the story, and the gameplay is not really worth expanding upon in like one full trailer. Again, lots of work, pretty darn important if your game really needs that sort of extra little bit of video to help people understand what it is. But once it's done, and will serve you for discovery purposes. And then next is TikTok. As of this talk, kind of the new hotness. TikTok is just a good way to show quick looks at your game, or sort of like small snippets about your game. And you can use it to broadcast announcements and potentially gather lots and lots of eyeballs from players, and also get wish lists that way. It's a decent amount of work because it is video and editing, and you want to be decently active so then that TikTok will want to promote your videos more. But TikTok is just really good because each video, the way the algorithm works, has a potential to be seen by lots and lots of people. So the first we put out one video, gets shown to a bunch of random people. If it does well, gets shown to even more random people, and then it goes on and on, as opposed to some places like YouTube or Twitter, which it's more dependent on who is actually following you. It's a lower chance of getting discovered sort of randomly on a lot of other platforms as opposed to TikTok. And then there's your website. Your website is just one place to house all the game's information and make it look really pretty. It's especially good if you're launching on multiple platforms. But really, it's kind of more to present the game to like investors, publishers, and press, not as much for players, because really you want the players to get to the store page after they see like an article or their trailer. You don't really want them to go to the website, because it's kind of adding extra clicks between the discovery of the game and wishlisting or buying it. So I'd say we're saying it's not really for every sort of game a huge priority. It really depends, again, on your goals, and if your goals are to like get it seen by like a publisher or people who might help fund your game. But again, website can be a lot of work, and it also can be upkeep because it has things that can go out of date, like screenshots and trailers. Okay. And then next up is Discord. The intention of Discord is to build a community. It's like a long-term goal, and to just communicate with like really the most dedicated fans. This one we're saying it's really not as important, especially if you're new, especially because it's also just a lot of work and a lot of upkeep because just the real-time nature of it. You want to be pretty active in there so then that people have a reason to follow it. Whereas if everyone joins your Discord but then finds out you never use it, then why would they stay? But again, it can be so much work. So we're putting this on the lower end of importance. And then next are online events. E3, as I was talking, E3 just happened pretty recently, so a lot of online events and showcases where people could see games. This is a way to potentially get a lot of eyeballs on your game and gather wish lists. Maybe like during the Steam Festival, you share a demo for your game. And it can be a lot of work because you have to get like a trailer ready or maybe a demo version of the game ready. But it can be quite effective at getting your game out there, which similar to conventions, which currently there aren't any conventions going on, but conventions are similar. But actually, you can't actually show as many people your game at a convention because just the physical space and the number of people who show up at a convention. But you can use it to connect with like media, maybe build up your mailing list, do some in-person user testing, but conventions are just a lot of work and a lot of money. So on the grand scheme of things, we're saying this is not quite as important as some of the other essentials we cited. So now Dana's going to help us figure out how to choose the different strategies for your particular game. Just some tips here.
We've now gone through a ton of possibilities that you can do and probably overwhelmed you with all of the options, but this is called personalized marketing. So how do you choose what actually makes sense for your game? So the best case scenario is to use multiple tactics and strategies. So to mix and match some of the essential items and also some of the nice to have items. But it doesn't mean that you have to do everything. It's better to do some things really well than to try and do all of the things and kind of like half-ass do them. So we're going to talk through some potential ways that you can figure out what makes sense for you. So first, here's one way to break it down. So look at the following factors for you. So resources. What does your team realistically have time and money to do well? Skills. What do you guys have the ability to do well in-house? And what does your team lack the ability to do that you might need to outsource? And do you have the budget for that? And also, where do you think you could get the most impact for the least effort? Because that is great. And then your community. So what tends to resonate with your community if you already have one? I think it's also really important to think through like, maybe your studio has a community already built in from other games that you have, or maybe you're starting from ground zero, and that makes a difference too. The great thing about social media, though, is that you can get analytics, which will help you figure out what works well and what tends to resonate. Maybe your community responds really well to animated GIFs or something like that. And so you know that you should be making more of those. And then again, going back to the goals that we talked about earlier. So some of your personalized goals here. So things like, are you trying to get a publisher or get featured by a store page or build that community? Because all of those change and impact the types of strategies and tactics that make sense for your game. So here's another way to potentially break it down. So you can look at, like, just list out all of the different tactics that we talked through and then rank them. So we have them ranked by the impact. So what do you expect the impact of doing the thing to be? And also, how doable is it for you and your team? So, for example, we've got Discord here, which probably relatively low impact. If you've got a community manager or something, it might be more doable or less doable, but it requires a lot of upkeep. And you can do that for every single thing, add up all the totals, and then kind of see like what has the highest score. And that's like a very non-scientific but potential way to figure out what would work for you. Another way to do it is to look at upkeep. So we've gone through all the previous slides and given everything an upkeep rating. So we've divided all of the things that we've talked through, or at least most of the things that we've talked through, into upkeep categories, meaning that they require like the amount of work that they require on an ongoing basis. So looking at these, you might want to choose more things from the low to medium category and maybe one thing from the high category, and only choose something from the highest category if you guys have the resources to do it, like we talked about earlier, because you don't want to end up getting stuck doing all of the things in the high or highest category, only because that will feel very overwhelming. So another way to potentially do this, we've divided all of the tactics into 4 various categories of like marketing goals, we'll say. So one being discoverability, one being make your game look cool, another being talk to people about your game, and build community. So we've taken all of them and thrown them into which category we think that they best fit into. And so like if you're struggling with what to do, one thing you could do is just pick 1 or 2 from each category, and then at least you know that you've got your bases covered, at least somewhat. So it's also important to note that on the last slide, we categorize everything into just one bucket. But a lot of things overlap or accomplish multiple goals. And so this is a list of the tactics, but also you can look at like how many of the different goals those tactics help you accomplish. So you can see something like messaging reaches across all 4, something like, you know, Facebook might only do 1 or 2. And so looking at how many different touch points you're getting there could be another way to decide what makes sense for your game. Now Derek is going to kind of wrap up and summarize what we've talked about.
All right, so to sum things up a little bit, first, remove the word should from your marketing vocabulary. I know we threw some shoulds in this talk here, but really, before you just follow up on hearing someone say you should do something, think about like, okay, how will that work for your game? What is the intention behind that thing? Try not to think, okay, someone else did that, so I should do that. Just stop yourself there when you have that sort of thought. Think about, okay, why? And will that help your game in particular? And then you'll hopefully be more successful. And then, as we were saying, start with just one thing and branch out when you're able. This especially goes for like social media platforms, like if you decided you want to do YouTube or Twitch or TikTok, start with just one thing and try to get good at that and find success there. Because if you try 3 things, especially if they're very labor intensive, then if it doesn't get as much attention, and you probably will not have as much success. And then if you're finding that it's working, then at that point, it might be good to start adding on different social media accounts or something like that, so then that you can potentially get that audience. And then also just experiment and pivot as much as you can, because I mean, failure during the process is much better than failing at launch. And a good thing about being indie especially is that if you do some sort of marketing thing and it doesn't really land, it's okay. You can just delete it and then try something new. Or if you find out you did something that got a success and you didn't expect it, then you could just pursue that angle. And also remember, some games do better on different platforms, and you might not know what platform is best for your game when you start out. So experiment and pivot. And then also, while you're doing this, just think about like what would give your audience joy, because especially with games, they take a long time to come out. So you really need to give people a reason to follow you on these different places. And one way to think about how you can, entertain them in the meantime is to think about, okay, what would this audience enjoy, either because they like a similar genre, or there's a certain part of my arts or some other part of your game that they would enjoy seeing. So think about that and try to learn from your audience based off of what gets success or what they're just saying to you, and try to make it fun before the game even comes out. And again, you're not trying to trick people into buying your game. You're trying to inform people, help them make a decision, show how you're unique, and also find the audience that will resonate most with your game. And being transparent is really a good way of doing this. People respect transparency, and they don't feel good when they get something that it wasn't what they expected. So just be transparent, be honest, and help people figure out what your game is. And also, if you help them figure out that your game isn't for them, that's still fine, because there's no such thing as one game that works for every single person, and you just need to find the right people who will enjoy your game. And this is all, again, to personalize the marketing. Show who you are and what your game is through your marketing. Don't copy other people, because even if their game's similar to yours, it's still not your game. Make it personal. Don't make it stale and corporate. Just try to find the voice of your game in its marketing. And thank you for listening. Again, my name is Derek Liu, and my partner is Dana here. So these are the places that you can follow us and either work with us or learn more about what we do. And thank you for watching.